Yesterday, we saw a major trade involving a young up-and-coming top NHL prospect in Cutter Gauthier. Since the trade, we've heard lots of speculation and rumors about why he wanted out of Philadelphia. Why wouldn't he sign? What was the problem? And were the Flyers actually quietly shopping him for some time? This was kept quiet, but was not new that he wouldn't go to the Flyers. We'll discuss what we know about the scenario in a huge trade that almost involved Cutter Gauthier back at the draft, coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we've heard and learned lots about Cutter Gauthier and his reluctance to go to the Philadelphia Flyers over the past several hours since this trade broke last night, sending him to the Anaheim Ducks. It pretty much caught most of the hockey world completely by shock. I'm sure it caught Jamie Drysdale by shock in Anaheim, as he's now a member of the Philadelphia Flyers. It's nothing that anybody really seen coming, and that's because the Flyers and their counterparts that they had trade discussions with really did a good job at keeping this one from getting out. They really kept it quiet, and we've learned now that there's been lots of information going on behind the scenes that nobody was aware of, although we did know bits and pieces. I guess it's just a matter of piecing it all together, that there was issues that would have led to him not wanting to be a Flyer for quite some time. I mean, when he was first drafted at the 2022 NHL draft, he seemed totally excited. He made lots of comments. For example, his mother was from Philadelphia. I've seen the Sportsnet interview, rewatched that he did with Caroline Cameron after being drafted. Asked him how he'd like the color orange and how the jersey, and he said it was great. His mom was from Philly, great organization. Then of course I've seen podcast interviews he did about his first interaction with John Tortorella. Seemed quite good. And now all of a sudden, like, he doesn't want to be a Flyer. Like, it just obviously something drastic had to change between then and now, and even before this, obviously, because like I said, it's been going on for some time. Now, we do know that he did not attend Flyers development camp in the summer. That raised some eyebrows. Obviously, there was some discussions around, because he did go to the one the year before, and there's some rules around the NCAA. But there were some excuses that were given, and it was kind of looked over. It wasn't made out to be a big deal. Anyways, all that said, there were some situations like that kind of went, now looking back on it, they were a bigger deal than we knew. So what we've heard now, and there's lots of stories out there, to me, the story that makes the most sense, and the source that I reference a lot on this channel, extremely reliable, is Elliotte Friedman. He seems to probably have one of the better handles and graphs on this story. And what he was talking about just in the last hour here on the Jeff Merrick show makes a ton of sense. Essentially, it sounds like after last season, we saw Cutter Gauthier go to the World Championships, and it sounded like he had a great tournament there. When his season was over last year, essentially he wanted to turn pro, and the Philadelphia Flyers were not going to accommodate that. They were not ready to sign him. And what Friedman said was essentially that because of the signing bonuses that they would be willing to give him in his contract, being a high pick, that those bonuses would have created a salary cap overage. So they did not want to do that. But they made it clear, or supposedly, that they still really value him. They really like him. It was in the best interest of the team for him to do one more year of college hockey and then turn pro. And I don't think that went over very well. Now, like Friedman said, maybe the way the message was given and the way it was received are not the same. You got to remember, it's like, the Flyers looking at this saying, it's really not a big deal. It just doesn't really work for our cap situation right now. Probably wouldn't hurt at all to have another year of development, and we'll be in a much better spot for him to make the team, to handle his contract, and it's just better for everybody. But it doesn't sound like that's necessarily the case on the other side. That seems to be when the relationship soured, because after that, he wouldn't go to development camp. There was trade whispers and a rumor that we're going to discuss here as well at the draft. And even recently, he wouldn't even talk to the Flyers. Like, they tried to meet with him on multiple occasions. Apparently, they went to Boston College. I think it was John LeClaire and Patrick Sharp tried to meet with him. He would not talk to them. It's believed that Keith Jones and Danny Briere went over to the World Juniors, tried to meet with them at some point during that tournament. He wouldn't talk to them. And it just, according to, and Briere even confirmed it when he did his media scrum after the trade last night, the communication from Cutter Gauthier in his camp pretty much stopped. They pretty much cut off communications after they told the Flyers that he did not want to sign. And that came basically after the fact that they, like, this has been some time. We're looking at, like I said, at the end of last year, when the college season's over, you quite often see a lot of college players turn pro. At the end of the year, they get in a few games, and then they start the next year as their first full campaign. That's how a lot of college players end up doing it, and it didn't work for him, and it seems like because the Flyers wouldn't do that, that's when everything changed. So, obviously, that makes sense that he felt that they should basically bend the rules of, just make it work. Basically, I'm valuable enough, I'm important enough, impactful enough that you should bend whatever you got to do. I don't care about the cap. You should want me in there. And that's basically what Friedman is saying is what he feels soured the relationship. Now, there was even normally a pretty reliable Philly, I guess we'll call him an insider, or, very well-known Flyers broadcast, Snow the goalie, Anthony Sanfilippo, very well connected, and I've referenced his intel numerous times on this channel, and he's usually very accurate, and I'm not saying he's not in this case, but he even, on their show, drug Kevin Hayes into it, saying that he spoke to an organization source within the Flyers who said that had Kevin Hayes' fingerprints all over it. Now, we do know that Cutter Gauthier was befriended by Kevin Hayes right after he was drafted. The two, he kind of mentored him a little bit, became fairly good friends in that sense. Cutter Gauthier said that, if he ever had any, that Kevin Hayes was somebody he could always call and ask if he needed advice or what have you. And we know, obviously, that Kevin Hayes departed the Flyers organization last year. Last summer as well, when the trade that was being discussed between the Blues and the Flyers essentially was reworked and sent Hayes to St. Louis, when there was rumored about Torrey Krug being involved to go to Philly, there was accusations against Kevin Hayes that he told Torrey Krug, you don't want to go there, don't waive your no trade clause, and that he was involved in kind of poo-pooing that deal too. Now, Kevin Hayes outrightly denies this. Apparently, even last night, made an effort to call and speak to Flyers brass, including Danny Briere, making sure he knew that he had nothing to do with it. Now, the Flyers seem to be accepting of that, and Keith Jones on the radio hit this morning even said that he knows that Hayes spoke to Briere and that they're okay with his explanation and that they don't think he was involved. So that intel appears to be off, but we'll see. I know Sanfilippo's kind of been taking a beating by a lot of people. Obviously the Spit and Chicklets guys got involved because they know Kevin Hayes personally very well. Ryan Whitney and Paul Bissonnette were obviously contacted Hayes right away for comment, and he completely denied it, and I think he even referred to Sanfilippo as a clown. It got kind of nasty between all the sides. It was just like the stuff floating about there, and there's some that say, oh, he didn't want to play for Tortorella. There's some that say he grew up a Penguins fan, and that is true. He did reportedly grow up a Penguins fan. I've seen clips of him admitting this. At the end of the day, you got to be a pro, and all a pro, good things he had to say about the Flyers when he first drafted. I'm not buying that. I'm really not. I think Elliot Friedman's story makes the most sense. That for whatever reason, he wanted to turn pro at the end of last year, and they wouldn't sign him because of their cap situation, and that seemed to change everything. It's just that simple. So now we're going back to the draft in 2023, the Connor Bedard draft, as we call it. There was lots of rumors and lots of speculation that the Philadelphia Flyers were trying to move up in the draft. We know they grabbed Matvei Michkov at 7, and obviously that pick has been, debated. He's certainly got tons of talent. Some people thought they shouldn't have taken him because of the Russian factor. They're going to wait too long. Will he even not come at all? Like, there's all that. Great player, though, and it seemed like they were very comfortable taking him. But there was a lot of talk that they were looking to move up. And a lot of people were convinced that they were trying to move up to not only get Michkov, because they were interested in him, but to make sure they got Michkov and secure a higher selection to do so. Now there's talk that, when they were talking to the Montreal Canadiens, because we do know there was a lot of rumors, and we discussed it here on the channel, that there was definitely 100% conversations, there's no doubt, between Danny Briere and Ken Hughes around moving up and their first pick, which was number 5. And now it kind of makes more sense. People are saying that there's belief that they were discussing a trade that would have sent Cutter Gauthier to Montreal in exchange for that 5th overall pick, because they knew at that point that Cutter Gauthier did not want to be a Flyer, and they were already gauging his value and trying to work on moving him. Now, of course, there was still hope that if they don't find a deal that it's an absolutely no-brainer, maybe Gauthier changes his mind, maybe they work it out. I don't think they were hell-bent on trading him 100%, but they were kind of at the point thinking, okay, maybe we should. And if the right deal's there, we probably need to do this. And the right deal never materialized to the point that both sides were in agreement, so it never happened. They continued to try to massage the relationship, figure things out, and they really couldn't get through to him. They don't even really fully know why that he doesn't want to be a Flyer. Now, like I said, the speculation from Friedman, of all the things I've heard, makes the most sense. He typically is very reliable with his sources, so I am buying that story more than anybody else that's out there talking about the reasons why. But at the end of the day, the Philadelphia Flyers are saying they really don't truly know and understand why Cutter Gauthier doesn't want to be a Flyer, because they wouldn't even talk to him. And that makes sense that would be true too. So this trade, like I said, can you imagine the Habs drafted the top defenseman in the group, David Reinbacher. Now, again, a little bit of a controversial pick. People say Reinbacher is going to be a good defenseman, but some didn't feel he was worthy of that high of a pick. We do know now that the Flyers were, when they were talking to GMs around the league to move Cutter Gauthier, that they really wanted a young defenseman in return, preferably a right shot. Jamie Drysdale's that guy. David Reinbacher could have been that guy. Now, I don't know if it was a one-for-one deal. Maybe there was other things discussed. We don't know, but clearly that was a trade that was on the table. Discussions were ongoing, and it could have drastically changed things here. Cutter Gauthier, to me, would have been a tremendous pickup for the Montreal Canadiens. If you take a look at their prospect pool and all the young talent on that team, to me, they have a lot of more, they really are possibly set for building a really deep future blue line. There's a lot of good ones there that should pan out for them, and I don't think they'll have any issues in the next 2-3 years really having these guys develop. There's probably not even room for all of them. They're going to have an excess of defensemen that have the potential to make it here and be, at the very least, top 6 and a fair bit of them top 4D. So to add to their forward group, to me, makes a ton of sense. Now, clearly they valued Reinbacher higher than some of the guys they already have, or they might have pulled this deal up. But Cutter Gauthier just had a dominant performance at the World Juniors. We've seen what he's done in NCAA for Boston College. Had a tremendous World Championship tournament against, more experienced players. He is looking like he's going to be a great player. And they don't have as nearly as much depth for that young talent at the forward position as they do on the D-core. So to me, if I'm Montreal and that's on the table, I seriously think I would have done it. It's the same kind of position the Anaheim Ducks find themselves in now, with a sudden, deep core of young defensemen that are emerging to be really good. They've got a bunch of them in their system. And not only that, the Anaheim Ducks are not having a good season. They will be picking, most likely, hard to say how the lottery balls fall for them this year. They could pick as high as 1 or 2. They could pick anywhere around 5, 6, 7. It's going to be a high pick. And, right now, based on standings where they're picking, there's probably a pretty good chance they could get a defenseman. And where they took a forward last year in Carlson, to get a top D this year, they could probably, just, I'm not hard to say if they'll turn out to be as the same or better or worse than Drysdale, but in their system where they're not worried about contending right now, they could replace him. They can get Cutter Gauthier now and get another defenseman comparable to Drysdale in the draft. So really, I think it's a good move by the Ducks and Pat Verbeek. Gauthier looks to be really good, and I think he's been playing more center, but I think he'll end up playing on the wing, given the fact I have McTavish as well as Carlson. Zegras is probably going to play more on the wing if he remains a Duck long term as well. I do wonder about his future, but that's another video, another story, another topic. But yeah, that's how everything that's unfolded what we know. The Cutter Gauthier reluctance to be in Philadelphia has been ongoing for quite some time. It was kept quiet, and everything came to a head before people expected it to. So when we get the trade news, it was like, whoa, nobody's seen this coming. It was totally unexpected and caught everybody off guard. And now here we are. You got to remember the Flyers, it's not the exact same scenario, but, back in the early 90s with Eric Lindros, the Flyers benefited from a top player not wanting to be in their city, and they ever make the acquisition. Now, it's a different story. It's not the same. Some people out there talking about Lindros and Gauthier saying, oh, it's the same story. They're even now. No, it's not, because Eric Lindros made it clear before the draft, knowing the Quebec Nordiques were picking number 1 overall. He stated, do not pick me. I will not play for your team. So they did it anyway. So it's not like this at all. Gauthier seemed excited at first, soured after the fact a year later, or just about a year later. Not the same. The Quebec Nordiques knew well ahead of time that he had no intention of ever playing for them. And you know what? At the end of the day, they did get a big haul in the trade. That trade helped them down the road, and maybe it was the right decision to do anyway, because even if you don't get the player to sign and stay with you, you have a major trade asset, and I think that's just how the Nordiques looked at it. Now, today's a little bit different. When things get out and you're trading from a position of weakness, it's not the same. You tend to lose value. But at the same time, it's been reported that Briere spoke to as many as 18 to 20 teams. You can't tell me that many conversations with different teams around potential Cutter Gauthier deals, that it wasn't a little bit more well-known around the league that he was available. And you think they would have been using that as a negotiation tactic. Now, the other thing, too, just to quickly before we go here, we got to remember in the end of training camp, or around the training camp time of this current season, there was talk when Shane Pinto, before the suspension was announced, when was going through his negotiation with the Ottawa Senators, that the Flyers were trying to swoop in and get Pinto. That there was, the Senators never made it clear and said that they wanted to trade him. They never really went to teams and said, we're having a hard time here. We think we're going to move the player. Never happened that way. But teams were saying, listen, you got this unsigned player. What are you thinking of doing? If you want to talk trade, we're interested. And it's believed that maybe, some people believe, I don't know if we'll be able to confirm this one, but when the Flyers were engaged on Shane Pinto, that they may have put Cutter Gauthier on the table for that type of trade as well. And the Senators obviously didn't want to. They take the known commodity in Pinto instead of the bit of an unknown in Cutter Gauthier. Whether or not that exactly went down the way it did, we don't know, but it is rumored that when they were having those trade conversations, because a lot of us were wondering, well, if the Flyers are trying to trade for Pinto, what could be coming back? And there was all kinds of speculation about who within the Flyers they might be offering up. There was talk about Morgan Frost. Well, if that's the case, they're not going to do that. They're not going to trade Pinto for Frost. No offense to him. But if they're putting Cutter Gauthier on the table, it was a lot more intriguing. Then the suspension happened, everything went away. I don't know if things would have changed in that sense had the suspension not been a thing. But at the end of the day, there's some pretty interesting conversations that were likely had with other teams, including Montreal and the Reinbacher draft pick, and the Ottawa Senators possibly around Shane Pinto, if that indeed is true. So we'll find out at some point, maybe if somebody speaks more around what they knew behind the scenes. But that's a couple of big trades, but the Habs one at the draft was the most intriguing. Can you imagine if we would have seen a big blockbuster deal with the Habs getting Cutter Gauthier? Obviously, Ken Hughes' connection to all those northeastern Boston area kids. Boston has connection to Boston College, Boston University, all those NCAA schools. He's well connected there, has lots of good people that would know the player extremely well. I'm a little surprised given their defensive depth that they didn't pull the trigger, but hey, say Levine, he's now a member of the Anaheim Ducks. Let me know your thoughts on the trade and all the behind-the-scenes stuff as it reportedly unfolded down in the comments. We'll likely be back a little bit later today with another news and rumor video with all the recap of all the ongoings around the entire NHL. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.